Hi there, everybody, and welcome. Another episode of the Business School podcast, where we typically cover the kind of topics that you might not find in your regular business textbook. And we're going to dive right in and talk about some things around entrepreneurship and what that means, and the kind of things when it comes to actually starting your own business, which I know many of you have that aspiration. But then how do you what are the things that you need, and what are some of the skills that you might not be picking up, say, through an MBA program? So my name's Darryl Pereira. Really pleased today to be joined by Catharine Montgomery. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Catharine. And Catharine, just to set the stage here, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Darryl. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So my background is starting in agency work. From the beginning, as soon as I graduated from Auburn University, the next day I knew I wanted to work at Edelman, and that's exactly what I did. So PR and the multitasking and the long hours is exactly what I wanted to do. And so I did that my whole career, and then I felt like there was something missing in the PR world, and that was around social impact. How can we do this work that I loved, but also help other people? And it was actually really hard to find an agency that focused on that. I moved to Boston from DC and thought I found the right progressive agency to work at. That did not work out. They weren't so progressive. And I moved back to DC during COVID, and I just ended up starting my own business, Better Together Agency. And we focus solely on working on campaigns that make a positive impact in the world. And it could be corporations, it can be nonprofit, as long as we're doing something that makes a positive impact. And so it's been, surprisingly, very rewarding. And we've helped so many communities and industries I had no idea were focused on social impact. And I've had a lot of people question, like, how do you even make money focused on social impact in an agency? But it's there. People are trying to make a difference. And so that's how we've kept moving.
Nice. That's awesome. Are there any kind of example of the kind of campaigns and just to help set the stage around this idea of social impact and what that might mean? Is there anything you could
Of
share?
course. There's this company called Red Rabbit, and I had never heard of them, but they create culturally relevant food for schools. And so, normally we have the square pizza and a milk carton. At least that's what I remember as a kid. And now they might have china masala, something that kids don't normally see. They might have a classmate who brings that in and they're like, what is this? This is disgusting. But they'll have it actually in their cafeteria, and the company trains their chefs to be able to talk to the children about it. So if they have a question on what is this, they can get background on where it's from, what it's made of. And so they're bringing that into classrooms. They started in New York and then moved to Philly and then moved to DC. And so we were able to build awareness from that for them through media engagement. And now they're really successful in the area. They're moving even more nationally and moving to the West Coast. And it just goes to show how we need to educate students and everyone else about the different cultures there are in the world, and how we can be stuck in our bubble sometimes and not know about other cultures and other opportunities that there are. So, and I would have had no idea about Red Rabbit. I mean, who would know that this company is doing this? And
Yeah.
so I love that Better Together Agency focuses on all industries and not only some, when we can just be so open and help so many different people in so many different ways.
Yeah. No, what a great mission for that company as well, just to be focused on this idea, the lunch break during your
Yeah.
research, you can actually learn something about other cultures. I'll say as an English guy that hails from India and is currently living on the west coast of the US. I do spend some time up in areas. Yeah, I'm generally in the Bay Area, but spend some time up in the areas that are a bit more rural and around people that may have not left California, let alone the States. And I know even recently, just with some guys that were doing some great construction on the property that we're working on. We just took lunch out, and we just happened to have, and I think I just had some Indian food that my wife had cooked, and something maybe we picked up from like Trader Joe's, something like that, and this guy never tried it before, and he was kind of like, he was blown away. He was like, "Wow, this is great! I've never eaten this food." And then we had a little discussion around, hey, where this food came from and that side of it. Which, in the grand scheme of things, it was, it's a part of it. But then you start thinking that degree to which that can open doors, right? Just something as small as that.
This is so random, but for some reason I have this hot Malaysian sauce on my desk. But it's like so amazing, it's like so hot.
Yeah,
And like I love how their traditional hot is so different than like an
yeah,
Americanized
yeah.
hot, like Tabasco sauce. And I picked it up at a market in DC, and it's made in New York. And so yeah, I just love the different cultures. I think I need to order some more, which is why like it's good to be educated about the different cultures
No,
out
for sure, for
there.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, you've educated me. I need to go check that out. That sounds
yeah, it's so good. Mama lambs, mama lambs.
all right. Well, let's then, in terms of, as you said, you completed your MBA, very focused, knew what you wanted to do, you continued in this path. But in terms of then, where you've got to in terms of being a successful business leader, are there things when you look back and you think back to what you studied and what you went through for your MBA? What are some of those areas where you think, damn, I wish I had a little bit more of experience, or I knew, we'd had a little inkling about this area of business that we didn't get into? I'm guessing, we're familiar with some of the big areas. You've got finance, you've got, some of the things around business development. Maybe there's other pieces, but what are some of those areas that would have been that you like? I wish we'd known a little bit when
For
I was
sure.
going into running my own
Actually,
business.
talking about this recently, and I didn't know I was going to start a business when I got my MBA, which is kind of something I did, something random. But I felt like I was getting a good overview of all the aspects of business. So I could, understand any corporation I was in, like how, finances work, marketing. But as I became a business owner, I realized like I just need to know a financial sheet. Like I just need to know the basics of adding and knowing and being able to predict like how many employees I need, and just actually sitting down with a spreadsheet and doing that work. And so I do it with my CFO now, but it would be so great like if I didn't have that person to know how to do those, I mean, somewhat simple tasks. Like if you're running a business, doing the profit and loss spreadsheets. I had done a little bit of it earlier in my career, but having someone actually sit down with me and say, this is, what you need to do in running a business. I mean, all the case studies are great in getting an MBA. I think going deeper into those and what actually got them to that point would be more helpful, and being more practical. Like it's a lot of strategy, I think, which we all need, but that tactical like expectation that we have when running a business, um, I don't feel like it was there. And so those are things I wish, like how to actually hire someone. Like what are the qualities I need to look for different positions in different industries? I mean, we have HR overall. We know what the industry is, but we don't know how they make those decisions really. And I think those more like sit down, practical items would have been great.
And when it comes to it, that's great. And I love what you said about, like you say, about the profit and loss and certain bits about, like you're saying, like some critical decisions, right? There are some quite simple decisions, which not necessarily simple to make, but you can see when you look across different businesses, okay, we seem to be growing. When do we bring on employee number, number X? How do we get to this point at which we know what kind of employee we need at this point to help us move to next level? But and then what in terms of, as you said, for the HR side of it, as you've gone through that and have you hired people, are there any lessons or tips that you would share back to audience?
Yeah, of course. That's been the hardest thing for me is HR. And I always think, oh, I found the perfect person. A lot of them are referrals, so I really trust the person referring them to me. And I sit down with them. We have a whole process of a first interview, writing test, second interview, references, third interview. That's more of a conversation. So it felt like a very lengthy, in-depth process. And what I would learn is that a lot of people said, I am ready to work at a startup. I'm ready to work at an agency. And working at an agency is tough in itself, like with all the different demands you have from clients. But working at a startup in an agency, everybody has to wear every hat. You could one day be writing a Facebook post, but then presenting to, $1 million potential client. So it can be tough, like switching up and doing all the things. And I don't think a lot of people are prepared for that. There's no real school atmosphere, where it teaches you to do that. It's really just experience. So being able to have someone with 5 or 6 years of experience that have never worked at a startup is really hard for them. And I've also learned recently that I don't have the capacity to train younger people the way I want to and need to, and they deserve. And so we've kind of started hiring more senior level people who can go off on their own and just do the work. And I don't have to explain how to do it. And then they can start to build their teams and have the capacity to do that. So it's not that we don't want to provide those opportunities to younger people, but I know that they deserve something that we can't do. And it's taken like 2 years for me to realize that. And it was actually a former client who was like, have you ever thought about doing this? And I really love having those people around me, even if they're former clients, who can have that outside perspective and give me insight. So yeah, HR was and hiring has been so tough. And I've had some people be completely rude about it. Someone said, you're not a leader, you're a manager. And you just have to like take those things and just learn from them. Like, why are they saying that? But also, people get really upset and it's like hard to fire people and all that good stuff, or bad stuff. So yeah, but I feel like we're moving in the right path. I've hired someone who's my right hand, and I don't know if people have heard of Rocket Fuel, but there's like a visionary and there's an integrator, and I'm very much so a visionary, and she loves to integrate. So she's able to build that culture, that atmosphere we need, where people want to work at the organization. So I feel good about moving forward.
Nice. No, that's interesting as well, what you said there as well about this idea that it's almost like complementary skills or makeup, right? Not necessarily skills. It's just the way that you approach, and you might look at a problem and how do we get through this and what's the best approach? Like you say, you might be able to see the way you take it as a visionary, but then with somebody else, then to bring in someone that can actually then take that vision and be able to work with the team to pull them along as an integrator and see the connections and be able to make that through. Again, do you feel like that's something as well that maybe there's more? I know it's something we've touched on, some of this idea around the psychology of business and bringing together different, people with different psychology. Do you think that's one area as well that could be, that should be talked about more?
Oh, I agree. Like I had no idea about a visionary or integrator, type mentality until some random person suggested I read Rocket Fuel. And it's been around for a while, like that concept. And I was on an airplane and I was like, there was no other choice but to read. There was no internet. So I was reading this and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my life. Like, I need this. I was highlighting like every part of it. And it was just like a revelation of, you know, where has this been like the past 2 years when I've been trying to build the agency. So there definitely is that perspective that should be taught in classes too when getting your MBA. Like this could be something when you're starting your business that you need to think about. And it might not be the case like for all, people who start businesses, but it definitely was for me. And I really believe that the person who's on the team now is that person. We might hit on this in a few minutes, but we're aiming to be a AI forward agency, and I have like that dream, and she is helping me like actually implement it, like that implementer, and I can have these big ideas and I can go have these conversations and go to conferences and meet people and say what that means, but actually putting it into place at an agency is so big, and it's so tough with training people on how to use AI in the workforce and things like that, but she can lead on that part, and we just complement each other on that vision and actually doing it.
No, that's awesome. And let's go there. That no, you touched on this idea of AI, and especially, I think it fits into this idea. We're talking about the kind of things that you might not find in a business textbook. Fair to say, I think at this point in time, where we're sitting now in 2025, there's not a lot of textbooks that have been able to catch up with all the developments that are going on in the AI space, which are happening incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say when we look at all the functions within business, communications has been one area where AI has been present for quite some time now. So let's hear your take then in terms of, what's your position in terms, like, as you say, you're trying to be an AI forward business. What was the motivation for that, and what's the path been to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I started using ChatGPT when it first came out in December 2022. And, I thought it was, amazing, but it was very fluffy and all those kind of things. I never thought about, using it in business really in my agency. But as if there have been improvements and everything, I realized that we can do more than content. We can do more than write social content for clients using it. But I read this book called AI Driven Leader, and it really makes you think of AI as your thought partner. So you might use it as a person to brainstorm with you, or, I have this big vision, but I don't know how to actually make it reality. So can you help me come up with ideas on how to do that? So I use it daily as something for that, or to help me think of ideas for a proposal that I have. Just there's such a range of ways to use it, and I don't think that we're being most effective when we are using it. And so I've been reading so many articles, listening to so many podcasts, going to so many conferences on it, that I really think as an agency, if we don't implement it now, we're going to be behind in 2 or 5 years. Like there are going to be PR agencies that are not going to survive. And I was at a annual meeting in Toronto of boutique agencies. A lot of them have been around, 10, 20 years, and they just didn't want to incorporate it into what they were doing, and really thought that I was kind of crazy to even, be thinking about, doing that. And aren't you getting rid of jobs and all of that? And so that hesitation, I think we're going to hesitate too long before it's too late. And so right now we're really embracing what we're calling AI forward. AI first is actually what a former client suggested that I look into. And that's really not putting the employees first. And so we want to make sure people know that our employees are the center of the work we do and how we do it, but that we also can incorporate AI to be that thought partner. So AI forward, what Microsoft is calling it, is frontier firm. So kind of firms that are starting off thinking about how agents can be incorporated with their employees. I think Google actually fired 6,000 people because they're thinking today or yesterday, because they're thinking about how do they move forward in the next few years? Like, what is that going to look like? And I don't think it's a workforce where they don't have as many people. They'll probably hire them back. But when it comes to coding, they're not needing as many people because AI can do that. So it's all changing. Like you said, every day is so fast, really hard to keep up. But I do know that incorporating workflows, automations, agents into the everyday work is going to make it more efficient, like we all know, but also be that thought partner that can help you relate to your audiences more and bring that perspective that's needed.
I love that idea, like you're saying, of being the thought partner. I know, for instance, say working in marketing, and I'm sure you see this as well in the communication space. I've seen projects where, for instance, you've taken where it's like, oh, great, we can just use AI to write, 400 articles for us that are all SEO optimized and do that side of it, which is true. The tools can do that, and I think sometimes though, when I've been involved in projects like that, it feels like, okay, something around quality and branding suffers because it's the content looks heavily commoditized. Something that I know, say for instance, Wired magazine is called AI slop. So this idea of kind of using these tools purely to think of, okay, this can just drive efficiencies and it can just do a bunch of stuff that I that or I or a team would do. It sounds like you've got a different perspective on this. That's not really the side that you're looking at. This idea of AI as a thought partner, this idea of looking at, say, for like you say, AI forward is different to being AI first. This isn't about saying let's look at how we can cut jobs and do that side of it. It feels like we're all still trying to figure out to a degree. Sometimes this term "human in the loop" comes up. This idea
Mhm.
of which feels like it's somewhere around this idea, like the interaction between us as humans and these tools. Is there anything that you can share, as you're going through this, where you currently are around this, and how, for instance, yourself or the members of your agency can be most effective when it comes to using these tools? It sounds like
Yeah,
definitely at the
of
strategic end,
course.
but I think this is something we don't think through enough.
So, like a lot of what I found so complicated is a lot of my former employees, they would use generative AI. They would say, create this social content for a client. They would copy and paste it into a document. It didn't have the voice of the client. Yes, I want you to use AI, but you have to be able to train it the right way. You have to be able to create those GPTs or whatever it is to make sure you have that voice. And so that's a part of it that's really missing. But also, a lot of people aren't able to identify the biases that are in generative AI. And you want to be that company that gets it out the fastest. Like, who is going to get out the next version tomorrow or whatever it is? And they're not thinking about, they as in the tech companies, are not thinking about the biases that are being incorporated into the technology they're releasing. I mean, the data that's put in, it's from humans. We all have biases. And so the data we're getting is biased. Like, we're never going to get rid of all biases, but we can at least be aware of them. And so a lot of the companies that are incorporating AI into their daily work, they will use it and they're like, this is fantastic. This is so amazing. It was so fast. But they're not realizing the output they're getting is biased. So I mentioned example with Midjourney, and I put in femtech, and it came back with Asian women. And so it thought, oh, technology, a female, oh, they must be Asian. And I reran it over and over and over, and it kept giving me the same thing. And then I was just frustrated, and I just created my own like carousel or whatever. So it's like those things that honestly is not trying to be malicious. The tech is not trying to be malicious, but if you don't know, if you're not aware and you're in your world of that's what I see on TV, that's what I see in magazines, that's what I see on social, then you won't know that that is bias. And so I know that that aspect is going to make Better Together Agency even more special in that we can help clients be more efficient, use tech, be that thought partner, but also say, like, this is not right. Like, if you say affordable housing and pictures of Black people come up, like, that is not reality. Everybody needs affordable housing. And so we're able to shape that narrative using AI photos and AI content, but making it relevant to everyone. And I'll give one more example. This was a couple years ago using generative AI. And I was working with a client that focused on educating Black and Brown women on breast health. And I needed to do a radio ad for them. And I was like, AI was new. I was like, let's see what AI comes up with. And it was a community event they were having. And it was like, yo, fam, we're about to eat some grub, like, come out with us. And I was like, who is talking like that? So you think that, this Black and brown people and we're going to get some grub? Like, so it's just amazing that from that, it really hasn't changed. Like, I cannot believe I was using an image generator yesterday and it was coming out with this biased content. So we have a long way to go, but I just want people to be aware of what it is and how to identify it, so that when we're working with others, we can educate them as well.
Yeah. No, what an important point, this idea. And I love, what you're saying here is more around this idea that, okay, so the tool has some problems. You're not saying let's not use these tools because they have some issues. You're saying there's ways that we can work with these tools
Yeah.
to identify or if you're aware and if you're conscious that of the kind of issues and the kind of bias that might occur with these tools, there's ways in which you can actually then think about how you overcome that, and the companies that do that will be the ones that don't get caught out being culturally unaware, or being the ones that don't actually have that aren't that you're just not even seeing what's going on, or understanding the cultural impact or the milieu in which you're actually you're putting your content out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think the world is there yet, like ready to think about the biases. It's more of an ethical, responsible, are we using this, uh, the environment, things like that. Um, but I do think there are moments where things shift. And, we've seen that over decades, hundreds of years of how mindsets change, priorities change. And I just believe I have to know that it's going to be a priority for companies in a few years to address those biases. And I just hope that, we're at the forefront of that and that we're already helping clients do that. I just got off a webinar a couple minutes ago, and a woman said, like, Catherine's at the front, like she's owning these biases in generative AI. And I mean, I love that. I honestly don't know anyone else that's prioritizing that in work. And, it isn't making that big of a splash. Like a lot of companies, I presented at Possible Conference a couple weeks ago, and, a lot of people marketers aren't thinking about that. And our survey, navigating biases in generative AI, we're just trying to educate businesses on why it's important. And, there are a lot of biases and, ageism, classism, things like that, but it also impacts their bottom line. I mean, as we know, like DEI will never be the same, but if they waited long enough and they implemented the tools right, they would have increased their bottom line and created more market share. It just isn't immediate. And so those short-term gains don't lead to long-term impact. And you can have, the fastest technology right now, but in the long run, it's not going to be the best and what you need to be successful.
Yeah. No, for sure. And just to pick up on one point that you raised there, this idea that, like you say, you're focused with your agency, and a lot of work you've been doing has been around this idea of social impact. Um, Am I right in saying what you're saying here is that it's not this isn't just about, like, say, something on the edge of your business that you might do just to kind of almost as that feel good factor, right? You're saying this is real business. This is the idea that through social impact, like almost the example that you gave of the organization that had found a course to effectively differentiate itself in the school meal market by using
Yeah.
that moment of school meals to approach it differently. And for schools that are thinking that might have a level of cultural diversity and that see that as an opportunity to get people to understand more about the world around them, then hey, here's a business opportunity. Is that how do you see this in terms of the idea of the relationship between social impact and real business value?
So I believe that it is real business value. I have seen it change and impact the business value of organizations. And, whether it's getting more members to join an association or bringing more people to a corporation and believe that they actually care about social impact and making a difference in the world. So whether it's been those small nonprofits or large ones, or big corporations or small, like it always makes a difference. It just like in, PR, it takes a minute, it takes like different KPIs to realize like what's actually working. But it's the same with social impact and realizing that that's going to differentiate you from others. And people are paying attention to culturally relevant companies, and they're more likely to work with them. One of the examples I gave was Ulta Beauty, and they created this technology and using hundreds of diverse women where it matched their foundation for their skin tone. And it wasn't inaccurate, because they had such a diverse audience. And that's what we're lacking most of the time, is just diversity, and diversity of mindset, not just diversity of color, but diversity of people in the world, or ages, all those things we need to put together to create models that actually reflect who we're trying to target. And so it increased their market share. It's just making more of a trusted brand. And so there is an impact, there is a correlation between social impact and companies, regardless of who they are.
Nice. No, what a great thought that, yeah. And like you're saying, like with that example of Ultra Beauty, right? Then you think of it, there's a group of people out there that may have different skin tones to the ones that are typically, that where the foundation, what's available typically on the market. That's
Right.
business opportunity, right? Though that's not,
Yeah, right.
you're talking about significant, when you look at your market and you're looking at, say, a community that could, there's a whole untapped potential community there that you're able to open up through projects like that. Um,
Exactly.
if there was one piece of advice that you would give to somebody that maybe is starting out, maybe your younger self, that when you were just going through your MBA program and you were getting to that point where you're starting to think about maybe establishing your own business or moving out on your own, what would be one tip that you would give?
Yeah, I wasn't even, again, preparing to start a business, but I think it's being open-minded with what an MBA can provide you. Sometimes we think it's, sticking in whatever area you focus on. So like marketing or entrepreneurship or whatever angle you go when getting an MBA, but there's so many possibilities. Whether you stay in the corporate world or start out on your own. And I didn't realize that that was an opportunity. I thought I was just learning more of how corporations worked, getting a more well-rounded view of that. But it's actually, something I didn't imagine that MBA could provide me. So I really think that I wish I'd gone into getting my MBA with that open mindset. And I think that would have helped me understand what I actually needed to get out of an MBA more so than going into it and, oh, this is a random thing I have to do. So actually having that purpose of being open minded.
But what a great thought, that idea that, yeah, being open-minded as you approach it, as well as having a sense of purpose, right? To think open enough to look at it, to think through where are you trying to get with this and how can you
Yeah.
best help me
Yeah. And
achieve
you
that?
can incorporate that in business like every day, being open to criticism, constructive criticism, feedback. I have learned like what my areas are, what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And building a good work culture is not something that I'm good at, but getting business and building relationships is something that I am good at. And so it's like, building, help training and learning how to do those things that you're not great at and learning from others and getting that feedback is good, but also like figuring out what works for you. And I couldn't have done that without being open-minded and realizing that there are things that I should focus on more than others.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you're saying, part of it, it's not necessarily this idea that you think, oh, yeah, I need to go master all these different areas of business. I need to do it all. I need to get there. What you're saying, part of it is, but once you start to understand, it's almost like knowing what you don't know, right? At one level is figuring out where your strengths are. And because it is business and it tends to be with other people, how do you fit those gaps and how do you bring together a team that can work together, right? And you
Exactly.
complement each other to get
Yeah,
to
and I've struggled. That's what I've struggled with. So that's what I'm looking to just move forward with and learn from and take what maybe has been bad and turn it into good. And I've had so many experiences with that I feel like I just know everything when it comes to business, but I know there's so much more to learn.
nice. All right. Now, what a great point, I think, to end the discussion today. There's so much further we could go into this, but I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us, yeah, a little bit about your own personal journey, the pieces of it that where you feel that, like you're saying, the bits of it that where you can grow, where you can explore. Also, then, this AI journey and what it means for, I think there's some great tips in here in terms of how we can work with AI tools ourselves, how we approach these. We don't think of it, especially in an area like communications, where there's a lot of talk about it replacing jobs. It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily have to be that way. It's about how we work with these tools, but then also to do things like recognize the bias that exists within these and be smarter about how we deal with things like that, as opposed to just, maybe just taking what these tools give it and running with that. Really appreciate this today,
yeah,
Catherine,
of
for you
course.
sharing with us. This has been Catharine Montgomery. Check out Better Together Agency if you want to learn more about some of the topics that we've touched on today. Thanks,
Perfect. Thank
Catherine.
you.
All right. This has been the Business School podcast. I hope to catch you on a future episode, or maybe you'll check out a past episode. But check us out if you want to learn about, if you know, whether you're on continuous learning, wherever you are in your career. If you're just starting, if you're later on, as Catherine's saying, it's great there's always areas of business that we can learn and we can improve. I definitely have felt that going through this path of running the Business School podcast. But look forward to catching you on a future episode. My name's Darryl Pereira. Thank you. Goodbye.